Secrets of the Zodiac. A shocking discovery was made at an ancient Egyptian temple when they cleared away 2,000 years of grime. Underneath an incredibly thick layer of dust, grit, and soot, archaeologists unveiled ancient symbols of the zodiac. These very old star signs could change the way we view astrology and horoscopes. This temple was already famous for its astronomical ceiling and connection with the cosmos. But now, after scrubbing away muck, a team of Egyptologists have unveiled a full set of star signs, all 12 Egyptian zodiac symbols from Aries to Pisces. You might be wondering what the significance of the zodiac was in ancient Egypt. Experts from the University of Tübingen said only the richest people in Egyptian society had their tombs decorated in zodiac symbols. Astrological texts were extremely important when it came to burial rituals. Horoscopes have been found inscribed on pottery jars. Astrological symbols were often etched on sarcophagi. People were just as obsessed with the zodiac 2,000 years ago as they are today. However, the one place you don't typically see zodiac symbols is at a temple. That's what makes this new discovery in Luxor so unusual. Some of the symbols are easy to recognize, like Sagittarius. Sagittarius was represented by a centaur archer. Only during Egyptian times, he was also depicted with wings and a spiky tail. The next time someone tries to tell you astrology is a modern invention, point them to the Temple of Esna. This place proves Egyptians became fascinated by astrology, even if it was near the end of their reign prior to the death of Cleopatra. The zodiac itself is much older. It goes back to the days of Babylonia. Do you believe in astrology? The Epic of Creation. Babylonia isn't just the place where the zodiac was created. It's also home to a very interesting story on the origin of humanity. Have you heard of the Enuma Elish? It's also sometimes known as the 7 Tablets of Creation. If you have heard of it, you know the Enuma Elish contains information on the creation of the human species. You'll also know that the Babylonian creation myth is nearly identical to the same story from the book of Genesis in the Bible. The Enuma Elish is not a single artifact. It's the name of a creation myth that's been found recorded on multiple tablets across the realm of Old Babylonia. Tablets inscribed with the story have been found at Kish, Ashur, Sultan Tepe, and at the legendary library of Nineveh. The tablets date to about 1200 BC, or 3,200 years ago. That being said, experts think it's even older. The inscribed clay tablets are likely copied from a much older version of the story from over 4,000 years ago. Now, let's get into the meat of the tale. According to the Enuma Elish, in the beginning, there was chaos. There was a swirl of chaotic energy, raging water that spiraled through the universe. Out of that chaos came 2 streams, one of pure fresh water and the other of bitter salt water. Apsu was the god of fresh water, Tiamat was the goddess of salt water. The intermingling of these 2 great entities gave birth to the gods. The young gods were annoyed by the elder gods, so they started a war. It's very similar to the Greek tale about the gods and the Titans and how they waged war with one another. Much like how Zeus won that war, the champion god Marduk won the war against the elder gods and defeated Tiamat. From the corpse of Tiamat, Marduk created heaven and the earth. Then he created human beings from the bodies of the other dead elder gods. You might be wondering how the discovery of these clay tablets could change history. The truth is that the Enuma Elish already has. At the beginning of the 19th century, it was assumed the Bible was the oldest book in the world. Many scientists agreed the Bible was a completely original story that was written at the dawn of time. But with the rise in archaeology and the discovery of much older stories, the understanding of our world changed. Scholars now know the Bible copied its narratives from much older ones. Even the story of Noah and the Ark was taken from Sumer, where the flood myth was written down centuries earlier. There is one more thing about the Enuma Elish that you should know about. There are some scholars who believe the origin story of humanity is real. Humans could have really been handcrafted by superior beings who came from the chaos of space to our planet. Maybe aliens or maybe real gods, nobody can know. It goes against mainstream science, but so does everything spiritual or otherworldly. What do you think? The Mummies of the Canyon. The tale of a secret civilization living in the Grand Canyon has been told for a little over 100 years. The short and sweet version is that Professor S.A. Jordan and explorer G.E. Kincaid discovered the entrance to a cavern while adventuring in the Grand Canyon. This was over a century ago in 1909. The pair had supposedly been funded by the Smithsonian. When they entered the cavern, they discovered evidence of a highly advanced society, but then they left, disappeared, and nobody has ever found this place again. The only evidence of Kincaid and Jordan's discovery comes from a report printed on April 5, 1909 in the Arizona Gazette. The professor and the adventurer supposedly entered the canyon, which was carved into solid rock. Inside, they found artifacts that looked like they came from Egypt. There were huge statues depicting what looked like pharaohs, hieroglyphics, stone tablets, and mummified humans. It was as if they had stumbled into a lost Egyptian tomb in the middle of the United States. Not only that, but they reported finding idols that resembled Buddha, suggesting a curious mishmash of cultures. Some conspiracy theorists say the adventurers found an alien's hideout, an alien who had been pillaging random cultural relics from around the world and hoarding them in the canyon. The idea of a treasure-stealing alien pirate is exciting. And sure, maybe it's true. But unfortunately, not a single scrap of evidence has been presented to prove there are Egyptian mummies in a Grand Canyon cave. Explorers have been trying to rediscover the entrance to the cavern ever since 1909. In the original Arizona Gazette article, it said the cave entrance was about 1,500 feet up a sheer cliff. Not impossible to reach, but certainly difficult to track down. The theory among certain supporters of the unusual is that the government learned of the discovery and covered it up. If it had gotten out in the early 20th century that an Egyptian society had flourished in the Grand Canyon, it would have changed history way too much. It would have been obvious that Europeans hadn't found North America. The Egyptians had beat them to it. Although today it's well documented that Vikings got to North America before the Spaniards. There have been rumors of a mysterious cave being protected by a single soldier carrying a rifle. Other rumors say the cavern is still in the Grand Canyon, transformed into a secret museum for the ultra-wealthy elites of the world. In 1999, David Icke claimed the Grand Canyon cave belonged to the supposed reptilian overlords who rule society. What are your thoughts? Let me know in the comments below. The mysterious Templar Stronghold. Where do you think the Knights Templar made their last stand in the 13th century? I'll give you a hint. It wasn't in France, and it wasn't in Jerusalem. It was on a tiny island off the coast of Syria named Arwad. The island is very small, only about 3,000 feet long and half as wide. It was first settled 4,000 years ago by a group of seafaring Phoenicians. They built a trading hub on the island and serviced merchants as they sailed between ports. It was the Phoenicians who established the city of Arwad, which they called Ainuk. Fast forward to the Byzantine period, Arwad had turned into the city of Herodes. It became a Christian center under the rule of Constantine the Great. Then, in the days of the Crusades, the Knights Templar took over the island and turned it into a fortress. Surely a lot more happened over its 4,000 years of history, but most of those ancient events are lost in the fog of time. The very last safe place the Crusader Knights had was the island of Arwad. The island fortress was used as a staging area where knights gathered with the intention of retaking the Holy Land. There was a garrison of around 1,000 fighters, but they were on an island and vulnerable to a naval attack. In 1302, the Mamluks sent a fleet of ships to lay siege to the island fortress. The Templars repelled the initial attacks, but ended up starving and had to surrender. The Templars who didn't die from starvation were slaughtered by the Mamluks after their surrender. Shortly after the defeat of the Templars at Arwad, the Pope and the French king turned against them. Grand Master Jacques de Molay was arrested in Paris on charges of heresy. The Templars were rounded up and tortured until they confessed to their blasphemous crimes against God. It was the end of the Templar order in Europe. Nowadays, their last stronghold still stands strong on Arwad. The ghosts of the last defiant Templar Knights still haunt this place. Sadly, any secrets that might change history are buried on the island, unlikely to be found anytime soon. The Giants of Egypt. The story I'm about to tell you is baffling and hard to believe, but it's an important story to hear nonetheless, because it alludes to the existence of giants on this planet in the days of ancient Egypt. It all started in 1988 with a man named Gregor Spory. He was not an Egyptologist, nor even a scientist really. He was a Swiss club owner with an interest in all things Egyptian. He traveled to Egypt to embrace the culture, only to have his life changed forever. Gregor believed there is more to Egypt than old stone monuments and slowly decaying mummies. He thought the Great Pyramid was some sort of biological cosmic battery. He allegedly bribed guards to be allowed to crawl through the pyramid's tunnels, waiting to feel some spark of energy. He never did, and it was terribly disappointing. He even put a bottle of water at the top of the pyramid, thinking it would explode from all the cosmic energy, only for the bottle of water to sit there and do nothing. Gregor's journey was not over yet, though. He had been given a tip by a suspicious bartender at the hotel where he was staying. The bartender suggested he go on an excursion about 2 hours outside of Cairo to the district of Bir Hukr in Sadat City. Gregor agreed, desperate to find a secret every Egyptologist before him had somehow missed. Gregor ended up at a farm where he was introduced to Naguib, who came from a long line of grave robbers. Naguib had a very special artifact that had been in his family for over a century and a half. He wasn't willing to part with it, but agreed Gregor could photograph it and hold it for $300. Naguib showed Gregor the strangest object he had ever seen. From a wooden box came what looked to be a giant finger. I mean that literally, a giant mummified finger. It measured nearly 14 inches long and seemed to be truly organic. There was damage to the bone that looked as if it had been chewed on. There were dried skin folds and bits of fungus, and the nail was loose. Gregor was convinced he was looking at a real giant finger. It was so big that whoever's hand it had come from must have stood between 16 and 20 feet tall. Gregor was not able to take the giant finger with him, but did snap some photographs. As you can see from the images, Gregor placed a banknote next to the humongous finger for comparison. Where the finger is today, nobody knows. Gregor spent the rest of his life trying to prove the existence of giants. He studied the Bible, sacred texts from the Torah, and legends from ancient history. There are many today who believe the giant finger came from a Nephilim, one of the Bible's most frightening creatures, a product of interbreeding between extraterrestrials and humans, or in the Bible, angels and humans. Some think the finger came from an Anunnaki god during the days of early Sumer. Others have connected the giant finger to the skeletons of giants discovered in Minnesota in 1968. In 2009, Gregor returned to Egypt with hopes of finding Naguib again, or one of his descendants, but he couldn't. Nobody has ever been able to track down the mysterious man with the giant finger. What do you think about the relic? Let me know in the comments below. Fossilized Secrets. Scientists have recently revealed secrets that have been locked away in fossils for the past 1.75 billion years. These secrets could change our understanding of the planet's history. Photosynthesis is the way that most plants grow. They feed off the very energy of the sun to become big green titans. Scientists collected fossils from Australia, Canada, and the Congo, and found evidence of photosynthesis taking place almost 2 billion years ago. The fossils collected show evidence of cyanobacteria, the oldest living thing scientists know about. Researchers involved in the project believe cyanobacteria emerged on Earth between 2 and 3 billion years ago. The samples showed proof of oxygenic photosynthesis. Paleobiologist Emmanuel Javot said the find pushes back the fossil record by 1.2 billion years. This changes history because cyanobacteria was, in essence, the earliest living thing. Forget about lizards, dinosaurs, and jellyfish. Cyanobacteria were around way earlier. Understanding how these photosynthesizing life forms evolved on Earth is critical to understanding the secrets of life itself. Scientists believe it had something to do with an event that took place 2.45 billion years ago. It's known as the Great Oxidation Event. For an unknown reason, the concentration of oxygen in the planet's atmosphere spiked by a lot. The rise in atmospheric oxygen resulted in the birth of life. Yes, it's fun to theorize that aliens arrived from a distant planet and created life, but that's simply not the case, according to science. Maybe extraterrestrials came down and gifted forbidden knowledge to primitive humans with the brains of apes, but over 1 billion years before that happened, oxygen created cyanobacteria. Secret of the pyramid's perfect alignment. Scientists may have discovered the secret of why the pyramids of Giza don't cast shadows. Wait, you didn't know the pyramids don't cast shadows? It's one of the greatest mysteries of ancient Egypt. The pyramids have puzzled researchers for centuries. Almost everything about these structures is baffling, from their mysterious voids and chambers to the method behind their construction. One of the problems scientists have failed to solve is how Egyptians made the pyramids so perfectly aligned. Although the Great Pyramid of Giza might be a little lopsided now, its square sides are still exceptionally straight. Each side is approximately 455 feet long, with each point aligned with the cardinal points of the compass. It points north-south and east-west. According to engineer Glenn Dash, who published an extensive study on the pyramids in 2017, the builders aligned their monument within an accuracy of about 1/15th of 1 degree. Without modern tech, that's insanely impressive. But what about shadows? Starting around the 1st century AD, historians began noting how the pyramids don't cast shadows beyond the space of their construction. All 3 pyramids are notorious for their shadows not reaching past their base. They do have shadows, but they don't touch the ground. The lack of shadows is not from some sort of magic. The Giza pyramids are simply located on a 30-degree latitude. The sun, even on the longest day of the year, shines in such a way that a small shadow only ever creeps down the northern slope of each monument. It all goes back to the incredible alignment and the genius of the original builders. Glenn Dash proposed an idea for how the Egyptians created shadowless pyramids. First, he conducted an experiment using a long rod to track the shadow it cast every single day. The rod allowed him to mark the path of the shadow over a period of several weeks. His conclusion was that Egyptians could have done something similar. They could have anticipated where the pyramid shadows would be prior to building each one. All they would have needed was a long rod and a sunny day. It's an interesting theory, but one that's impossible to prove. Nobody really knows how the Egyptians figured out how to make giant structures that cast no shadow. Slaves in England. The world is a small place and always has been. About 1900 years ago, a dead man was thrown in a ditch without any personal possessions and covered in dirt. Archaeologists in England recently discovered this man's body during a road construction project. They assumed he was local, but still wanted to be sure. The scientists took a DNA sample and were shocked to discover the man was not local at all. He was Sarmatian, hailing from southern Russia, thousands of miles away. Marina Silva, who was involved in the project, said the man's DNA was very different from the rest of the Romano-British population of the 1st century. He belonged to the Iranian horse-riding warriors of where Russia borders Central Asia. The Sarmatians were beaten into submission by the Romans in 175 AD. What was one of them doing all the way in England? Researchers are stumped. The mystery man could have been the son of somebody in the Roman military. He may have also been a slave, taken after a battle and brought to Britain to serve. The ancient corpse of the Sarmatian is the latest piece of evidence for a scary time in English history. Just a few years ago, in the English village of Great Casterton, a group of construction workers came across a different adult male skeleton. He was found lying on his side, bound with iron shackles around his ankles. Scientists tested his DNA, finding he died around the year 226. Just like the mysterious Sarmatian, this other man had been tossed unceremoniously into a ditch. Archaeologist Chris Chinnock wondered if the mystery man was a slave. If he was, it would make him the first Roman slave ever excavated in Britain. Now, with the discovery of the Sarmatian, it's starting to look like there were more slaves in Britain. It's well known that the Romans practiced slavery. It's been estimated that by the end of the Roman Empire, nearly 40% of all Romans were slaves. But the trend never seemed to catch on in Britain. At least, archaeologists didn't have proof of it. Up until now, slaves in Britain were little more than a dark myth. But it's now looking like it could have been a reality. The alien cave paintings. There are some highly unusual cave paintings in southern Algeria that could prove primitive humans were visited by beings from another galaxy, or at least another planet. The astonishing cave paintings at Tassili Najjar depict creatures that appear to be wearing helmets and gloves, almost like spacesuits. They were created anywhere between 10,000 and 15,000 years ago by a mysterious group living in Algeria's Sahara Desert. In the Stone Age, ancient people from Africa drew scenes from their everyday lives in caves and on desert rocks. Over 5,000 cave paintings have been catalogued throughout the Sahara, and to be fair, a lot of them are very similar. People painted animals, plants, and hunting scenes. However, the depictions uncovered at Tassili Nasr are unlike anything else found in the region. They are completely unique, suggesting a great event took place that needed to be recorded. An event like beings from the sky descending in spacesuits. Sadly, the truth of whatever encounter happened here is gone. Only about 20% of the cave paintings are still visible. The other 80% have been worn by time to the point that they are nothing but faded color on stone. If experts are ever able to somehow recover the 80% of the missing paintings, they might have the full story that was originally drawn. Putting aside a potential encounter between Stone Age nomads and advanced aliens, the cave paintings have already changed history. The paintings show animals that no longer live in the region. Animals like giraffes, hippos, and alligators. The paintings also show rivers, thick jungles, and plants that couldn't possibly thrive in the desert. Scientists have taken the paintings as proof that about 6,000 years ago, the Sahara was a green and fertile paradise. It may have looked more like the Amazon jungle than the windswept sand sea it is now. The real Bigfoot. Do you think Bigfoot is real? On a scale of 1 to 10, with 10 being absolutely real, what's your stance? Let me know in the comments. The reason I'm asking you this question is because I'm about to talk about a creature that many have suggested is the very real Bigfoot. It's called Gigantopithecus blacki, an incredible primate that lived as recently as 200,000 years ago. Scientists believe it was the biggest primate that ever walked across the planet with 2 legs. It stood an unbelievable 10 feet tall, weighing around 660 pounds. When you look at an artist's interpretation of the Gigantopithecus, there is no mistaking how much it looks like Bigfoot. However, Gigantopithecus didn't live in North America where modern Bigfoot supposedly lives. The primate dwelled in the humid jungles of southern Asia. Scientists only know about it because of a tooth that was found at an apothecary in Hong Kong in the 1930s. It was a giant molar being sold as a dragon's tooth. But no, it was an ape tooth. Researcher Renaud Johannes-Boyal from Australia's Southern Cross University said the molar was 4 times bigger than any other great ape's tooth. This thing was an actual Sasquatch. In the years since, scientists have only found 4 partial jawbones belonging to the great ape, and a sizable collection of 2,000 teeth. Most of these teeth were found inside caves, suggesting the humongous primate lived a similar lifestyle as human beings 200,000 years ago. Nobody knows how smart the creature was or if it had human-like traits. Maybe it was a missing link, or maybe some distant human relative. There's just no way of telling without more evidence. As for whether Gigantopithecus migrated to North America and is still hiding in the forest as Bigfoot, scientists are dubious. Another mystery is why the giant ape went extinct. Scientists announced in early 2024 that they believe the great ape went extinct because it couldn't handle the shifting climate. The beast was too big and ran out of food as the environment shifted. It was reduced to living off bark and eating twigs before they all went the way of the dodo. Shocking Brazilian discoveries. The history of Brazil is in the midst of being rewritten. Excavations at an amazing archaeological site near São Luís have yielded thousands of artifacts. Archaeologists say some of the artifacts were left behind by a culture from 9,000 years ago. Without a doubt, this is going to rewrite the history of human beings in Brazil. 2024 is going to be a huge year for archaeology in the South American nation. The discovery happened totally by accident. A new apartment complex was being built in the coastal city when workers started finding human bones and pieces of pottery. Construction workers knew they had no choice but to call in the professionals. None of them knew just what they'd stumbled upon. Archaeologist Wellington Lage soon learned that discoveries have been made fairly frequently in the area since the 1970s. A human jawbone was found in 1991. Other random artifacts were found, but never brought to the attention of the outside world. As the team started looking through the construction site, they found a flood of stone tools. They uncovered decorated shells, bones, ceramic shards, and a lot of skeletons. they've been digging for 4 years now, and in total, 43 human skeletons have been identified and over 100,000 artifacts. This is according to the Institute for National Historic and Artistic Heritage in Brazil. And still, scientists haven't scratched the surface. Wellington said even after 4 years, there is an astounding amount of work left to be done. There are already 4 layers of history that the workers are struggling to get through. The team has grown to almost 30 people, including a documentary crew, chemists, and historians. The top layer of soil appears to be sprawling with artifacts left by the indigenous Tupinamba people. They lived in the region when European colonizers founded São Luís in 1612. Under that is a layer of artifacts from a nameless group of ancient Amazonians. Under that appears to be some sort of even older burial ground. Then, at the very bottom, almost 10 feet below the surface, rudimentary stone tools from people who lived 9,000 years ago. Wellington Lage said it's the oldest known settlement ever discovered in Brazil, but what it means for human history is yet to be seen. Forgotten universal knowledge. Are tarot cards really something magical, or are they just ordinary cards used by charlatans to trick the easily impressionable? Many experts believe tarot cards contain lost universal knowledge from thousands of years ago. I can tell you that tarot cards appeared in the early part of the 15th century in Europe. I can also tell you that each deck of cards consists of 2 major parts. There is the major arcana and the minor arcana. It is the major arcana that holds the majority of hidden symbolism in a tarot deck, with its cards directly tied to ancient occult traditions. History claims tarot cards were not initially used for peering into the future or seeing what fate had in store for somebody. The occult tradition of tarot cards began with a Swiss Freemason by the name of Antoine Court de Gébelin. Antoine believed the symbols on the cards could be traced all the way back to ancient Egypt. Others became interested in the esoteric mysteries of the cards, spreading rumors across high society. Soon, eccentric spiritualists like Eliphas Levi began wondering if tarot cards could be used for divination. Tarot cards transformed from a card game into a way to reveal secrets only accessible through somebody with a special gift. In the 17th century, Athenaeus Kircher connected tarot cards to the Bembine tablet of Isis. The tablet is an ancient Egyptian slab of bronze, enamel, and silver. The slab shows various images of people doing things that are not entirely clear. The goddess Isis is in the middle of the tablet, but there are over a dozen individual displays that do look suspiciously like images from tarot cards. Athenaeus believed the tablet was associated with secret rites, which were translated onto tarot cards in the Middle Ages. Nobody knows the real secrets of tarot cards or how they came into existence. Athenaeus Kircher didn't have the best reputation by the end of his career. He claimed to have mapped Atlantis. He also claimed the Voynich manuscript was written in an ancient universal language forgotten by modern humans. I'm not saying he was wrong, only that his theories found him discredited by most people. The Valley of the Lost Cities. In the rain-soaked jungle of Ecuador, scientists have used lasers to uncover what's being called the Valley of Lost Cities. Everything written in the history of books about ancient Ecuador is about to change. Archaeologists have identified an entire landscape that was dominated 2,000 years ago by an unknown civilization. The cluster of lost cities isn't as impressive to the naked eye as you might be hoping. There aren't great stone monuments rising from the trees. There are no majestic temples with the roots of behemoths winding through their stonework. Instead, the laser scans of the forest floor revealed the dense remains of earthen mounds and long-lost roads. Clumps of villages that have melted away into the forest, not even visible to those standing on top of them. It was only by using laser sensor technology that the towns and crumpled buildings were discovered. They are spread across a remote valley tucked into the rainforest at the foothills of the Andes Mountains. Although scientists don't know for sure which civilization lived here, they do have a very strong hunch. It's believed the settlements were built and occupied by the Upano people. This mysterious group of forest-dwelling farmers likely appeared around 500 BC. Then, for the next 1,000 years, they thrived in their own personal paradise. They survived all the way from the dawn of the Roman Republic through to the decimation of the Roman Empire, and they may have done it without fighting anyone, living totally at peace in their valley. What happened to the Upano is unknown. It's also unknown how they lived, what their cities were like, or what they believed in. Based strictly on the laser scans, archaeologist Antoine Dorison believes the valley was home to between 15,000 and 30,000 people. The valley had roughly the same number of people as London during this same era. There is one more crucial aspect to mention. The Amazonians were sophisticated and intelligent, but they didn't have the resources necessary to compete with other civilizations. The Romans mined for iron, and the Inca used stone. But the Upano had little to work with except mud, and that's why so many of their cities no longer exist. Thanks for watching! Be sure to stay tuned for extra content you might have missed.
The Undersea Monolith. In 2015, archaeologists found something they couldn't believe. A monolith over 30 feet tall was discovered looming above the sea floor off the coast of Sicily. It was discovered at a depth of 120 feet, looking so much like Stonehenge that it could rewrite everything we know about ancient history. Researchers still don't know exactly what they're dealing with. It's been estimated the monolith is somewhere around 9,300 years old. It also looks to have been made in several parts, then put together. To make sure this really was a man-made monolith and not just a big rock on the bottom of the sea, researchers confirmed holes drilled by hand into the stone. These holes were probably used for wooden posts to keep the monument upright. Let me tell you a few things about the history of the area. 9,000 years ago, this part of the Mediterranean was above water, but a flood changed that forever, washing away any settlements on the coast. It's very likely that this monolith was part of an early civilization in the Mediterranean basin, knowledgeable in architecture and construction. The thing is, researchers don't know which civilization built the monolith, and because only one was found, it likely was not part of an actual settlement. No foundations or buildings were discovered near the object. It may have been a remote place of worship, just like Stonehenge in England. The suggestion here is that even before Stonehenge was built, people in Europe were practicing building megaliths. It could even be the descendants of whoever built this giant stone tower eventually made it to England, where they continued fashioning stone circles for ritual purposes. The Tamil Nadu civilization. On the banks of the Thamirabarani River in India, a pot of rice was discovered from 3,200 years ago. Experts say that this simple discovery could change everything we know about Indian history, pushing two ancient civilizations together. To understand this a bit better, it's generally agreed right now that the Indus Valley Civilization was the very beginning of India as we know it today as a country and as a culture. But this pot of rice has shown that the Tamil Nadu civilization likely existed in tandem with the other. The rice was found during excavations in the village of Kizadi. This is in the south of India, where the Tamil Nadu civilization came from. It's in the north of India where the Indus Valley is located. The significance of this comes down to learned history. Most people in India believe everything Indian came from the Indus Valley, while the Tamil Nadu civilization of the south was merely a continuation of that several centuries later. What this discovery tells us is that there were two separate civilizations on the Indian subcontinent at the same time. It's impossible to say where each came from, but it's unlikely they both originated in the same location. This means that Indian people may have come from two very distinct cultures that spread from the top and from the bottom. If true, it could challenge many nationalistic views that people have on the subcontinent in regard to where their ancestors came from. Ancient baby vertebra. In Israel, researchers have discovered a vertebra that's 1.5 million years old. They believe this piece of skeleton belonged to one of the ancient hominids of the people who migrated from Africa into Eurasia. The vertebra belonged to a young boy between the ages of 6 and 12 when he died. He was pretty tall for his age and may have reached an astonishing 6.5 feet in height if he had lived into adulthood. It's not clear how he died, but his single remaining bone represents the earliest piece of physical evidence of an ancient human in Israel. Here's where things start to change history. The size difference between this fossil and other similar bones found at an excavation site in Georgia, the country, is immense. The difference suggests at least two different populations of ancient hominins arrived in Europe from Africa. This was not something previously known to researchers. What we can guess now is that migration to Georgia began 1.8 million years ago, and another wave began moving to Israel 1.5 million years ago. Before, researchers simply thought there was one big wave of migrants entering the area. Now it seems ancient migration from Africa was not a single event, but occurred in many waves throughout a period of up to 300,000 years. The big mystery scientists can't figure out is why one of these groups was so enormous, practically giants reaching nearly 7 feet tall. They don't know where these giant people went or how long they survived in Israel before going extinct. The Clovis in Michigan. 13,000 years before today, the state of Michigan was covered in a block of ice about a mile high. Suffice to say, this was not a habitable place. Archaeologists believe it was this thick wall of ice that kept some of the earliest North Americans out of the region. These were the Clovis people, the first organized society to live in what is today the United States. But something interesting just happened. An independent researcher with help from the University of Michigan identified a Clovis campsite in Michigan 13,000 years old. It's now believed to be the earliest archaeological evidence in the state, predating every other human settlement in Michigan by centuries. It could rewrite the history of the native people here, and even the settling of the Great Lakes. What's really incredible is that it shows people were here even though it was largely inhospitable. Mind you, the small pieces of evidence from the campsite only show a small group of people, maybe 6 in total, living on the edge of a river. It may have been a kind of scouting party, a group of Clovis trying to see how far they could get. It's likely all the ice prevented them from going any further. And it could explain why the culture centered themselves around the Great Lakes region, since the glaciers didn't allow them to continue spreading. Ancient female ruler. A shocking discovery in Spain from 3,700 years ago has shed some light on ancient royalty. Spanish archaeologists have determined the body of an ancient woman from the Bronze Age may have been the first case of a female ruler in Western Europe. Her bones were discovered at La Almoloya site in Murcia, dated back to 1700 BC. The ruin in which her body was found may very well have been the first palace built in Western Europe, in the cradle of the El Argar society. These people flourished from between 2200 and 1550 BC as the original European society to use bronze, build monuments, and erect entire cities. They are the earliest example of a society that created a class-based state in the region. They divided people into categories of wealth and labor. This woman, name unknown, was found buried in a jar beneath the floor of a large room. She was somewhere around the age of 30 when she died and had a daughter buried elsewhere at the site. She was found with a diadem and other valuable grave objects connected to politics. This has led the researchers to believe she was the ruler of the entire palace, and maybe even the whole El Argar society. Rewriting Chinese history. The ancient city of Sanxingdui was discovered by a man and his son in a small village in China's Sichuan province. They found some sacrificial pits containing treasures of bronze and gold, as well as plenty of pieces of pottery and fragments of old buildings. Throughout the last century, archaeologists have come and gone from this city, always uncovering more and more historical knowledge. We now know that Sanxingdui was arguably the greatest civilization in China about 5,000 years ago. But what's really changing the history books is the fact that the city has given up proof of a civilization that had its own customs and rituals separate from any other in Chinese history. In other words, Sanxingdui is a complete anomaly. Here's how mysterious this city is. The artifacts discovered here are so unlike any other relics found in ancient China, or indeed any other ancient place in the world. Some think they depict extraterrestrials, as usual. Archaeologists have uncovered bronze statues with bulging eyes and weirdly shaped bodies that look as though they were made to depict alien visitors. Plus, the techniques they used to build their highly advanced city weren't seen in any other part of China for another 1,000 years or more. It's even more mysterious because no mention of them can be found in any historical record. We don't know what language they spoke, we don't know why they abandoned their city and vanished, and we have no idea where they went. Humans in the Americas. Archaeologists investigating the Coxcatlan cave in Mexico have made a discovery that will probably force every textbook to be rewritten. They found animal bones and rock shelters suggesting a human presence in the area 33,000 years ago. This is shocking for one reason. It would mean that human beings were in North America 20,000 years earlier than mainstream scientists say. That's 20,000 years earlier than any other piece of evidence. It was a time when the ice sheets across North America were still thick and impassable, leading many to wonder how they arrived in North America at all. According to Andrew Somerville from Iowa State University, the discovery is changing the timeline of human migration into the Americas. While it hasn't been 100% confirmed yet, this cave does seem to contain evidence of human habitation. If it turns out to be true and verified, it will mean people were in the Americas earlier during the Ice Age. And if they were here 33,000 years ago, who's to say they weren't here even further back? Maybe even 100,000 years ago. Seafaring Australians. Surprising new archaeological research in Australia is changing what we know about the indigenous population of the continent. It turns out, ancient Australians were captains of industry, masters of the seafaring trade with vast international networks. These networks go back 3,000 years before previously thought. This is especially shocking because until recently, researchers believed the culture of Australia evolved in complete isolation. Nothing changed until Europeans arrived. But by looking at the archaeological record 3,000 years ago, researchers have found that Australians were building huge canoes that could go across the ocean, some of them up to 60 feet long. They then loaded each canoe with a crew of experienced sailors, a bunch of goods, and sailed thousands of miles to distant lands. This makes a lot of sense if you actually look at where Australians came from. Somewhere around 3,500 years ago, people moved out of Vietnam and southern China into Taiwan. They then started island hopping across the western Pacific. They dropped some people off in New Guinea. They continued on to the Solomon Islands, Fiji, Vanuatu, and eventually Australia. A single group spent about 500 years sailing through the Pacific, colonizing every uninhabited island. It makes complete sense that moving forward, these people continued their seafaring ways. The indigenous Australians continued to trade with other settlements in the Pacific, all the way to China. The drought that toppled empires. Archaeologist Harvey Weiss was excavating a site in Syria when he found a layer of silt so dry and barren it didn't have a single earthworm in it. This might not sound that interesting, but it turned out to be huge. You see, every layer of silt corresponds to a period in time. This particular layer, absent any worms, proved that something drastic had taken place to scorch the soil thousands of years ago, and whatever it was, it must have been huge to leave a blanket of earth too rancid even for earthworms. Dating has helped us figure out it was all because of a drought in the year 2200 BC. This was a time when the Akkadian Empire was dominating the regions of Syria and Iraq. But in the year 2150, the empire had vanished. The central authority was gone, people had walked out of the region, and the Akkadians were no more. The discovery of an intense drought happening at the same time as the civilization collapsed is no coincidence. It now looks as if this ancient society crumbled almost overnight because of a sudden lack of rainwater. But guess what? The Akkadians were not the only ones. 4,200 years ago, there was a disaster in Mesopotamia. There was chaos all along the Nile, and the Aegean and Mediterranean regions were in turmoil. It's now looking like some kind of mass drought tore the world apart for a short time, toppling empires everywhere it went. While the fall of these empires was previously attributed to things like social anarchy and war, it looks like it may have just been something as simple as a pause in rainfall. Early scavengers. In 1929, an amateur archaeologist made an interesting discovery in New Mexico. He found stone points scattered around mammoth fossils. These stone points were believed to be the ends of spears once used by ancient North American hunters to take down the biggest game of all, the mammoth. This was seen as clear evidence that human hunters were expert mammoth killers, and since then, similar artifacts have been found near mammoth bones at 11 sites throughout North America. These places are referred to by archaeologists as kill sites, places where ancient hunters descended on mammoths, giant camels, and mastodons. Well, all of this might actually be wrong. Archaeologist Meaton Aaron from Kent State University says the tools found at these supposed kill sites weren't from spears at all. Instead, they were just knives that hunters used to carve meat off carcasses of animals that were already dead. Other sharp objects found may have been used to throw at other scavenger animals trying to get to the mammoth remains. What all this means is that we may not have been as formidable as we like to think. It could be that instead of hunting mammoths, we just followed them around and scavenged the dead. This even makes sense based on some experimental data. Simulations have been done showing the force of an average human throwing a primitive spear at a mammoth. Researchers now don't even think these rock spears could have penetrated the hide of a mammoth. And even if they had magically penetrated the thick skin of one of these beasts, there is no way they could have gone through bone or the thick meat beneath. Headless Roman remains. Archaeologists investigating a trio of Roman cemeteries from nearly 2,000 years ago in England discovered something both shocking and disturbing. Their investigations revealed the decapitated bodies of 17 people. Experts called it an exceptionally high number of headless remains, leading them to make some pretty gruesome accusations. In total, the Cambridge Archaeological Unit discovered 52 burials while excavating a farm in the town of Somersham. 13 of them were buried face down, and 17 of them had no heads. The ones with no heads had their skulls placed at their feet. Some were even in the kneeling position, as if buried in the same pose as when their heads were cleaved from their necks. While you may expect people who have been beheaded to have some kind of defensive injuries, these skeletons don't. They don't have any signs of trauma directly before death, meaning they didn't fight back. This has led the archaeologists to theorize that the deaths were organized, probably part of some mass execution. It helps to know that the people living in this remote area of the Roman Empire or Roman-occupied Britain were farmers who provided grain and meat to the Roman armies. It's possible that when a group of Romans showed up to the farm, they didn't like what they saw and ordered the workers to be executed to keep the rest of the workers in line. It's not something that we can prove, but it is a solid theory. During the later part of Roman rule in Britain, deaths by execution climbed exponentially. State instability caused chaos and widespread violence at the hands of the Roman rulers. The haunted house. A woman named Caroline Humphreys says she lives in the most haunted house in the world, or at least one of them. She and her family moved into the house when she was only 8 years old. The house is actually an old British inn called the Ancient Ram Inn, located in the small town of Watton-under-Edge. When her parents purchased the property in 1968, it was already 1,000 years old. Her parents turned it into a bed and breakfast, and through the years they have found some pretty shocking things inside its walls. More specifically, the family has found a number of bones. Piles of bones, jawbones, spines, skulls, femur bones, you name it. Caroline's father was the first to discover a stack of human bones beneath the living room flagstones. And to make things even creepier, the bones were accompanied by a set of strange-looking daggers. In more recent days, Caroline's partner discovered another stockpile of bones hiding beneath the staircase. The family has never figured out where the bones came from, but because of the presence of the ritual daggers, as well as a strange meeting with a diviner, they believe it has something to do with sacrificial killings. When Caroline had a diviner visit her house, the spiritual medium claimed there were children buried all throughout the property. It could very well be that the home was used in ritualistic killings as far back as 500 years ago, perhaps even by witches. Caroline's partner also discovered a mummified cat inside of the wall during renovation work. If you discovered piles of human bones or mummified animals in your home, would you stay? Let me know in the comments. Escaping a tsunami. 3,600 years ago, the Thera volcano exploded. It unleashed a series of massive tsunamis in the Aegean Sea that decimated the Mediterranean area. For the first time, archaeologists have found the shocking remains of a young man and his dog, who were caught and killed in one of these tsunamis. It's sad and fascinating for two reasons. First of all, archaeologists have never actually found a human victim from this particular eruption in the archaeological context. Secondly, the location in Turkey where the man and his dog were found is new evidence of the northernmost area affected by the tsunamis caused by the Thera volcano. The remains were found during excavations in the small town of Sesme. It all started when construction workers building a new complex of apartments found ruins from the Bronze Age. Once archaeologists got involved, they started noticing much of the devastation in the town was caused by a sudden onset of water. And since they could date the site's destruction back to 1600 BC, they connected it directly to the volcano. Scientists say it was one of the worst natural disasters that humans ever saw, with the volcano unleashing an eruption over 2 million times more powerful than the Hiroshima atomic bomb. The blast wiped out the town of Akrotiri and helped collapse the entire Minoan civilization. It was so intense that it caused a global volcanic winter as far away as China. Sadly, the man and his dog, if indeed it was his, appear to have been trying to run away from the tsunami when they got caught. The pair got slammed against a wall by the massive wave. There they drowned, and there they were buried for over 3,000 years by the rubble. Spanish bomb. In January of 2022, a Civil War bomb was discovered in the Spanish town of Zaragoza. The story of its discovery is not only shocking, but a little traumatic. There was a building in the town undergoing some renovations. A local resident who survived the Spanish Civil War of 1936 to 1939 happened to be walking by when he saw the work being done. He remembered that as a child, fascist bombers had dropped explosives directly on that building, but not all of them blew up. It happened when he was only 6 years old, 80 years before these renovations were being done. The citizen was concerned that the renovators might accidentally find the unexploded bombs and set them off. He warned them, explained his traumatic story from the Civil War, and work on the building was halted. A special group came in with metal detectors to see if there really were unexploded bombs. And sure enough, they discovered one massive bomb that had been dumped by the Italian Air Force fighting for Francisco Franco during the war. It was huge and would have exploded with enough force to bring the whole building down. It was lucky the man walked by when he did, and even luckier that he had such a good memory. The Surgeon's House. The Surgeon's House is a remarkable old building in the Italian city of Rimini, situated in the beautiful Piazza Ferrari. It was first discovered in 1989 and underwent 18 years of excavations before finally being opened to the public. The house was a residential building during the Roman period, built in the 2nd century AD. It's called the Surgeon's House because of all the surgical equipment found by archaeologists. They discovered over 150 pieces of surgical tech, from scales and containers to preservations and medicines. They even found a therapeutic vase made for a person's foot. But the truly shocking discovery was in the surgeon's operating room, where he took care of his patients. There was a small hoard of coins abandoned at around the year 260 AD. Archaeologists also found a very peculiar device used specifically for extracting arrowheads. Adjacent to the surgeon's house is the ruin of a palace, which was destroyed in the 6th century AD. It was during this period that Rimini found itself in the center of a war between the Goths and the Byzantine Greeks. The palace was buried after the fighting and later became the location for a Christian cemetery. The Christians hacked apart the mosaic floors of the palace and buried bodies literally inside its foundation, making the later excavations of the area truly shocking. Viking Cave of Doom. Researchers in Iceland came across a trove of very rare artifacts from 1,000 years ago. The artifacts were discovered inside a mysterious cave of doom, called that because it is a tunnel formed by lava flows at the edge of a dormant volcano. These artifacts include a stone structure shaped like a boat, some beads from the Middle East, and the burned bones of animals. But the stone boat, carved like an altar in the cave, is by far the most interesting. Experts theorize it was used as part of a ritual ceremony to keep Ragnarok from destroying the world. In Viking mythology, Ragnarok was the end of everything. It was a fiery apocalypse in which the gods would come down from above and wipe out humanity. And since they didn't really want that to happen, they made sacrifices in the cave to keep the gods from raining terror down upon them. And here's where things get truly interesting. The Vikings had only recently colonized Iceland. After they arrived, this volcano exploded in welcome. The destruction, the fire, the smoke, it all would have been so terrifying that the Vikings thought Ragnarok was coming. When the lava cooled and the volcano calmed down, they immediately went into one of the hollow lava chambers, built an altar, and started making sacrifices to keep the volcano from ever exploding again. Mysterious murals. What began as an ordinary renovation project to convert a historic building into a public bar turned into an archaeological project to restore artwork. A couple named Nick and Lisa purchased a building in a small Washington town called Okanagan, about 4 hours from Seattle. But as they were tearing down the walls in late 2021, they found giant murals painted on canvases, each one over 60 feet long. They were shocked to find that their house came with old artwork. As it turned out, the artwork wasn't that ancient. It came from 1907, when the building was a movie theater, pool hall, and rooster fighting arena. That's right, cockfights. Washington in 1907 was a crazy place, where you could go to see a movie, play a game of pool, and watch two birds fight to the death. The couple managed to find newspaper clippings from 1915 that show the murals when they were first painted. They were originally improvements for the Hub Theater, 120 feet of panoramic landscape. Now that the couple know what they have in their building, they'll be refurbishing the artwork and keeping it right where it's been for over 100 years. What would you do if you discovered artwork in your home? Restore it? Sell it? Keep it? Tell me in the comments. Remains of the Aztec. Archaeologists in Mexico made a breakthrough when they found a shocking array of human remains hidden underneath a pyramid. The discovery came from the ancient city of Teotihuacan. But to understand it better, we need to go back to 2003 and look at an older find from the area. Nearly 2 decades ago, professionals unveiled a tunnel in the bedrock beneath the Pyramid of the Sun. At first, they thought it was just a natural cave beneath the pyramid. But when they kept digging, they found a carved chamber hemmed by huge walls. These walls were originally designed to block access deeper into the complex. But of course, archaeologists managed to get past the walls and go deeper to the very end of the tunnel. Here they found nothing, as the tunnel had already been pillaged by robbers throughout the centuries. After all, Teotihuacan predates the Aztec by around 1,000 years. People have been coming in and out of these temples and pyramids since the Roman Empire was still around. Fast forward to 2017, when archaeologists uncovered a similar secret tunnel beneath the Feathered Serpent Pyramid. This tunnel had not been pillaged by robbers, so archaeologists pulled out over 100,000 different objects, some of them dating back over 1,800 years. They had been placed there as ritual offerings to mysterious old gods. Some of the artifacts included crocodile teeth, crystals shaped like eyes, and jaguar sculptures. They also found countless human bones. These poor people had undoubtedly been the victims of human sacrifice. Viking Gold men. On a hill in Sweden, a bronze Celtic mask was found in 2004. 8 years later, an archaeological team was dispatched to the area to conduct a full excavation. The team discovered a large number of trinkets, some of the most fascinating of which were gold foil heads of men and women. These gold Viking heads were likely used to decorate cauldrons during the Iron Age, over 1,000 years ago. The whole excavation became very mysterious very quickly. The team retrieved at least 29 anthropomorphic gold foil heads, but they also found Roman glass, bronze treasures, fragments of vessels, and coins from the Viking Age. Nobody knows if these artifacts were abandoned or left on the hill on purpose. Whatever the case, they came from a very turbulent time in European history. This was right after the fall of the West Roman Empire, and every tribe was on the move. This leaves 3 options for how the mysterious artifacts arrived buried at this particular hill. They may have been part of a ritual burial site, which would explain all the gold heads used for decorating cauldrons, or they may have been buried with the intent of being picked up later. Or they may have just been part of a huge drinking and feasting festival, and then were left behind as the travelers moved on. The Pilbara. Scientists have finally proved beyond a doubt that the Pilbara region of Western Australia is one of the oldest places on the planet, formed over 3.6 billion years ago. But wait, isn't all of the Earth the same age? Yes and no. Scientists looked at the vast formations of iron rock in the Pilbara region, a place over twice the size of Great Britain. And what they found is that much of the iron rock was formed before oxygen was ever on the planet, meaning way before any life took form. It's the best preserved example of the most ancient part of the Earth's crust. The surface of our planet is always changing because of geological activity. Volcanoes, earthquakes, tsunamis, everything is always changing. It's been this way since the planet first formed, but some parts of the planet are much newer. For example, the Himalaya Mountains only appeared 50 million years ago. That's pretty young in the grand scheme of things. The whole region was flat, and then 50 million years ago, it turned into the highest point on Earth. That's what I mean by always changing. But scientists have now confirmed that the Pilbara region has never changed. According to Martin van Kranendonk from the University of New South Wales, it looks nearly the exact same as it did 3.6 billion years ago. It's managed to stay clear of every geological event and preserve itself perfectly. Looking at this region is like looking at the planet before a single organism ever existed here. Thanks for watching! What's your favorite discovery? Let me know in the comments below, and remember to subscribe if you haven't already. We've got lots more videos coming up. See you next time. Bye!